call the meeting to order at 8 o'clock. The light drop was good. We will start with our committee reports, audit and finance. Kathy?
Thank you. We met on May 12th at 4 o'clock, and we reviewed the material that was presented. The meeting, we approved the minutes of the April 14th meeting, and then we moved into the review of the April 26th financials. They were approved unanimously. There was a discussion about some line items, no issues. It was all understood and therefore approved unanimously. We also discussed and looked at the Form 990, and there was one correction that Deanne had noted, and that was removal of the title as noted here in the minutes. We did approve the 990, and we then reviewed the 26 work in progress as noted here, financial projections, and it did include a conversation about potential sale of lots, which I assume we'll go into in the future. And that was about it. Any other questions of our meeting? That's not my report.
And the governance committee meeting, Sue?
Yeah, good morning. So the governance committee met on May 13th at 9 a.m. We had discussion about an open board seat that we currently have, and then a future one, there's our friend Jim, who's retiring later this year. We talked about pursuing someone that has a financial background to get it well-rounded. And so discussion on that and potential candidates. We didn't have any additional business or a need for executives.
Thank you. And yes? Yep. Good morning.
So we have the financials in your packet. I'll say first, the 990 was filed. The one correction was made, and it was filed with the state, and it was also filed with the Char 500, and it's the New York State Charities Bureau, and it's been posted online. So for the EDC April highlights, the total assets as of the 30th of April were just over 950,000. Of that, 540 is cash. Our accounts receivable is high, it's 151,000. Most of that is contracts due from our contract with the county. We've been in contact with them. They're aware. It is a little bit longer of a lag than normal.
They say they're in process, so I'll let us know.
Yeah. Our prepaids are the same prepaids they are. It's insurances and websites, they're the same every month. I'll note that the fixed assets is that 156,327. That has the land assets in it. That we'll talk about later, but that might change for the first time in many years. And also draw attention to the right of use asset, because that I need to start including that, because that balances out the liabilities on the other side. That 86,000 is the right of use asset. That's the lease for this space. That 86,000. So it takes our total assets to 952. Our accounts payable, nothing remarkable. Monthly stuff, 6,000. The other current liabilities, that has the 41,000, which is the short-term lease asset, and the rest of it is like our retirement and our FSA. The long-term liability is the remaining long-term on the lease. That's 44,700. We have 432 in board designated funds. We have 137 restricted for Queensberry. And our total equity to date is 851,000.
So to net all that out, we continue to operate
Oh, yes.
near budget. Income's down a little bit, expenses down a little bit to match. Doesn't change the fact that we'll have a conversation later about the fact we need to continue to look at diversifying and growing our funding base. But at today's levels, we are continuing to operate basically right.
Yeah, I mean, I should draw attention to the grant line on the fiscal year to date. That 27,600. So most of that is passed through. That is the grant that's receiving for the childcare, rural childcare. And so that has 3 months worth of the pay that is a pass-through for the consultant. We're probably taking about 7,000 from that.
Modest amount to manage that process.
Any questions on the financial?
I don't know when to do this, but if you want it, you can go ahead.
That's what I was wondering. No one has any questions for Kathy, Sue? If not, I will ask for a motion to approve the April 2026 financials.
So moved.
Seconded by Kathy, all in favor?
Aye.
And then a motion to approve the April 20, our board meeting minutes from April 22nd.
So,
Second.
Thank you, all in favor?
I wasn't here, so.
Right. Moving to the Connect All update. I haven't heard anything in the last few days or.
Okay, yeah, I can update you, but I mean, the reason it's here instead of under my part is because Melanie's been a part of this process. And so we're kind of tag teaming this together. The Connect All, just to remind you all, is the cellular overlay grant that ESD is looking to explore. They put several $1 million of possible grant funds out to communities that they believed had the need for cellular expansion and that they were specifically looking for communities they have worked successfully with in things like the DRI. So Glens Falls and Lake George fell into that category. Particularly in the summer, Lake George is overwhelmed with cell capacity, and at certain times, and mostly event-driven at Glens Falls, we have the same problem. So we had begun this process nearly a year ago with them, and we had sat down with the city, with Lake George, and with the county to gauge their interest, mostly because it requires working capital funds. So essentially, this is a reimbursable grant. All but $20,000 of the cost would wind up being reimbursed, but you have to advance the working capital and then wait to be reimbursed. When we had a new administration in the city, we essentially had to restart that process with the city. The gauntlet that we've gone through with the city is I think, just a part, we're one of the few that have actually experienced the full new committee structure. I believe there are 7 committees in the city, and we have seen 6 of them with this proposal, which is a little funny since it's the same 4 people who just show up on a different night. But they're there to essentially provide a structured process to advance things to the full city council. There was some, I think, education that needed to happen about why was this happening and what did this mean. We went to public safety, for instance. There were questions about whether or not there would be a public safety risk of essentially having greater cell capacity. We were able to dispel some of that. It's not that we're essentially providing open Wi-Fi access. It just means that your cell phone calls will more reliably connect. But we spent a couple of hours walking through that with anybody that was interested. We've been to 4 other committees, and we'll eventually get to the full city council, I believe, on their next agenda. But in order to get there, there was some question about what would happen long-term with these assets. It's basically a series of robust Wi-Fi routers that are going to be laid into the city on existing poles and into the village of Lake George. The county's assets going to be movable, transportable extensions of a cell network, basically what they call cell on wheels, which is a trailer. So that part is not a fixed asset. But in the city, when we install these, the 2 years of support for this equipment is part of this grant. At the time that the 2 years expires, there will be an open question about, the assumption is going to be that the city would assume those because they're connected to their assets. But if they did not want to assume those, then there would be a question of, would somebody else want to assume those, or would we simply turn them off, or would we remove them? I think all of this is maybe more of a precedent than it is a real issue. I mean, how often do you replace your router at home? You know, maybe every 5 years when the technology requires you to. So occasionally they fail. there's not a lot of fixed costs to operating this. We would have to figure out how to replace any of the units that fail or service any of the units that are in alarm. But even if they were in alarm, the network itself would just have a blind spot. It wouldn't necessarily be down. There's been a lot of discussion at the city about not wanting to commit to long-term cost streams, but in this particular case, we couldn't really identify any specific long-term cost stream. Nevertheless, we went to the bid and shared with them not only the program so that they could weigh in on advocating for it, but also the potential of them, if the city did not want to, operating these or managing these assets. One of the things that this does provide is a platform for the city or any entity to do marketing or connection with anybody that's tied into this network. And that's part of what's being explored in the 2 years, is trying different models to see what works and what doesn't. And also the state in particular is looking to see whether that kind of platform can essentially pay for this kind of expansion. And then they would push these funds out essentially in a way that would be break even for the entities that, or revenue producing for the entities that took them. I think to net all of this out is we're at the point now where we have one vote left with the city. At that point, we will go to Lake George, and the reason that we waited, Lake George is ready to approve this, but the reason that we waited is because if the city opts out, then the numbers change for Lake George and the county. So we don't want to have them do it twice. But the county and Lake George are eager to move forward with their portion of this program. And the Connect All office said that if the city were to drop out, that they would still allow the program to go on with just 2 players instead of 3. It's taken us a long time to get to this point, and I'm very appreciative, Melanie, of your efforts to try to engage not only the bid, but to meet with the mayor about that. I don't know that everything will be this hard, because we were really one of the first things that the city was trying to manage this way. But it does tell you that the city is essentially much more structured than it has been in the past. And we need to factor time into any decision that requires overt approval with the city. But we figured it out, I think, successfully so far. I'm not sure if there's anything you want to share from some of your work in this.
Not besides the fact that the bid was very receptive to this, very excited. They quickly put together a letter of support to the mayor, and there were many examples that I hadn't even considered of businesses having troubles during large events or just busy tourist days or something with the civic. I don't even know what it's called. Thank you. The Hockey Arena is having an event that affects businesses. And actually, one thing I heard from was the arena. They're actually looking into something like this for themselves. For anyone who's been at the game, you can't send a text message out of the building. So they are looking at upgrading their own Wi-Fi, but this actually could alleviate some of that stress for them and save them a lot of money or just a different process for them. So there was a lot of positive feedback from the business community.
Is there a neighboring community who already has this in place that could give you all the benefits that they've seen from this?
We are the best.
You're the beta. Gotcha.
But that's also, I think, something that we've heard. This is the work that John has led for the last few years around broadband, and he's formed a relationship with the state as a trusted ally and resource. This is the starting point for anything north of Albany when it comes to broadband and communications, is the group that he's formed. So they came to us proactively. We did not solicit this grant. They came and said, we think you should consider this grant.
Is there an underlying plan right now for who's going to administer those things you were talking about, like the benefit? Because I think I brought it up before. The city did something like this 15, 20 years ago, right? When Ed was in charge of it, but they put all these discs and things on top of it. That was before the DRI. Because I have one on top of 18 Exchange, the Wi-Fi disc is still sitting there. The wires are just hanging there, but so there's history of these things coming and going. And, so I was curious what getting it up and running, I get that for events and things like that, but these rolling out benefits and things like that to businesses, who's gonna actually do that?
So let me explain this in 2 parts. First thing is a really important thing that I learned with the city. There's a difference between Wi-Fi and sound. And this essentially identifies the SIM card or the eSIM capability inside your phone and attempts to connect with that. If you attempted to do this with a computer in a traditional Wi-Fi sort of way, it would not be successful. Your computer would have to mimic a cell phone in order for it to be seen by this network. So this is really a cell phone connectivity thing versus a Wi-Fi thing. But secondarily, the 2 years has a series of vendors that will offer different approaches to either marketing or municipal use of the network. Bill had a very clear vision of how he wanted to do that at the city. I think the city is still trying to decide how and if they wanted to do that. If they opt out of saying, we would like to use it to, for instance, Bill wanted very much to have it be an event-driven kind of network where people would be prompted with information about events. If they opt out, then we would go to organizations like the BID or to individual organizations downtown, and there are vendors that are paid to do this, to offer opportunities for them to market on this, or for other people to leverage this network. All that's paid for 2 years, and the state is very interested in measuring what's working and what's not, so they encourage multiple uses of the network. I think at the end of the 2 years, this is part of what has to be evaluated. Is this something that the city sees value in and would want to continue? Would they want to see that the network stayed, but they don't want the marketing platform? All of that is part of the 2-year process. My best guess here is anytime that downtown merchants can effectively communicate more directly with people, there is a business opportunity there. I hope that we're able to discern a crystal one out of all of this. I think it could easily pay for whatever the rudimentary costs are of continuing to operate the network. But there's also questions of whether or not people want that. So
I'm just, what's in the back of my mind is what strikes me working with the city admin right now is they don't need more work, right? They're not bringing more people on for cost reason. And the people that they have on staff are already overtaxed in terms of work, right? So bringing a new program like this, and I think one thing that strikes me is if that was already out there, that, you know, here's this vendor, we would just come in and do it, here's what the cost of the work is to the city. I just suspect from a municipal standpoint, that's probably going through their minds, where we don't need another project right now.
It was the biggest question of the bid.
Yeah, I can get it.
They were willing to have the conversation of paying for it if the city didn't upfront the costs. And they've actually got a little to do that, they don't carry that kind of cash. However, the one thing they said is we're a volunteer board with no administration, and we will, although we're very supportive of this and we would love to see it happen after 2 years, we don't have anyone that could take care of it.
I can just see that, well, there are these people out there that could come in and do it from a, sitting on that common council standpoint, or even the mayor's office right now saying, all right, these are all coulds. I want to know who's going to come in and do this, right?
well, in this particular case, either Jeff or Amy, they've been participating in all of this, would likely be the ones that are monitoring or leading that activity now. Whether that would be the way that they would want to do it is up to the city. Well, so that is progressing. I would expect by the next meeting, we would have been through the city and would be through the process, or at least in the process with Lake George and the county. In July, I believe the date has been set up for the way that the state actually administers the next step of the grant. Once we demonstrate that there are resolutions from the municipalities that are partners that are in place, they also go through a public hearing. Those paths move in parallel. When both requirements are met, then the Empire State Development Board needs to actually release the funds. So we've been awarded this grant, but we have not been awarded the money. We will not get the money until we're able to meet the next set of milestones. But I believe that will occur in July, and I believe by the next meeting we have for you, we will likely be at the end of our part of that process. Are we okay to move from that?
Yeah, absolutely. The advisory committee is the next topic for board discussion. We've been talking about this for a while now. The idea of bringing on another group of leaders into the community to maybe represent different sectors that we don't have on the board, or just different expertise. A lot of names have been thrown out. Thank you to everyone who's filled out that list. But I think maybe formalizing it in the next soon would be great. So if anyone who want to continue that discussion of names or what that committee would look like, or I know Jim had offered to be a mentor, and his retirement, thank you, to that group or some sort of liaison between the board and this advisory committee. But do people have thoughts about what that might look like or the value in that or names?
Well, we do have a list operating so far, I didn't put it in here, but, and we've actually begun some of the conversations with people that are on that list to gauge their interest and to start to get them maybe thinking about this. It's been very well received by the several people that we've talked to about whether they think it's a good idea and whether they would participate in something like that. How many names do we have now?
Let's see. We're close to 20 additional names from what the board.
Okay. So I think we can always send you out the roster and, keep this as a living document. It was our intention to try to start to organize something as soon as this summer.
Yeah.
How many folks do you think we want to start with?
We were imagining somewhere in the neighborhood of 5 to 7.
And I know, I think I added someone's name from Hudson Headwaters on that list, so not just different sectors, but maybe future board members who get into sort of what we're doing here and working on, so that we aren't ever in a position with the government committees where we're really scrambling for names that we have. That doesn't have to be completely what this advisory committee is, but it would help introduce people to the EDC, so.
One area in particular that we focused on is finding people not only from sectors that we feel like need representation here, but from pieces that we can't even really define, what we call the hidden economy. The people who are quiet entrepreneurs out of their homes or running entities that are not brick and mortar entities are a missing piece, but we know from some of the data we'll go through later that they are here and they're here in force, and we're trying to figure out how they feel connected to the economic future of the place. They have an opportunity for input, and we can also learn from them about the things that either make us attractive or would allow us to grow that part of the economy in concert with everything else we do. So I would say probably a third of that group is intentionally focused on that.
Right, and also the importance of geographic representation from not just downtown, Glens Falls, and Queensbury, Lake George, North Creek, all the way up through the park to Scroon Lake. Just representing all these communities.
Trying to make sure that people who need us feel like there's a pathway to us, even if they're not traditionally a part of our community. Scroon is a really good example of this. Half of Scroon Lake is in Warren County. The municipality of Scroon Lake sits 1 mile across the line. Doesn't change the fact that everybody that lives and works in that area essentially accrues this way. And figuring out how we can be helpful and supportive of them is in our own interest as a regional economy, but we're not quite sure how to do that. So engaging with some of the merchants or some of the businesses that are in that area is a way for us to be able to gauge that.
But if you want to share the document with the board again,
Yes.
I've already shared them. Add names, look through and see if there's you'd be interested in us reaching out. Growing weekend, EDC, actually. Okay, so just jumping in.
Well, I think one of the things I wanted to do, we have some more stuff to report on here, but before we do that, one of the things that's clear to me is that there is space out there, whether it's geography, whether it's business sectors like we're talking about that are underrepresented, or whether it's just simply entities that have developed in the last few years that we don't have a relationship with. But I think our goal should always be to try to figure out how not only to grow the economy, but to grow the EDC community. I think that this is something we would like to share, not just as a staff, with the board. I think this is kind of like traditional boards. In almost any board that you serve, and I'm sure many of you serve on lots of boards, one of your roles as a board member is acting as an ambassador for the organization. So to that end, I think we're finally at a position where we can share with you some things that will allow you to have those structured conversations. But we're going to talk about those specifically, but I wanted you to understand that what we're trying to do is actually encourage many nodes of contact, not just us. If you become aware of a business that we should approach, we would like you to tell us. If you can begin that dialogue. We would like you to start. I don't think it should be limited to Warren County. I think we have enormous growth potential both north and south. There are businesses that do not have a voice or feel like they would like to have a voice in this area and its growth. In, for instance, the Albany area, I've never yet met somebody who works in the construction services or professional services world that doesn't see this as a growth market. And if that's the case, then we should be looking for them to be a part of our community. And not all of them are. And many of you have those kind of relationships. North of us, it's a little harder because they don't have any muscle memory for what this should feel like. There is no economic development entity in either Hamilton or Essex County. So that means they don't have a frame of reference for understanding what an organization like us is about and how we can help them. But if you have relationships in those areas, we should encourage the dialogue. I believe that this is part of our strategy to actually diversifying our funding and continuing to build a financial base that will sustain the work that's going to be needed over the next 5 or 10 years of making sure this place thrives. The key element to it all, though, is that we share an economy. It doesn't end at the county line. In fact, it actually, I don't know if the word grows, but in Essex County, they're an even more dramatic example of our economy than ours. Their economy is driven primarily by tourism and to a lesser extent by public services. Those are the two of the three pillars that drive our economy. They just don't have as robust a professional services or manufacturing sector, for instance, as we do. But if those things are good for us, they're going to be good for them. And figuring out how we can do things that are in the interest of our area with a richer, larger community is in everybody's interest. But this is a dialogue, not a one-way conversation. So I'm curious to know your thoughts about this as we embark on this in a more ambitious way.
I don't know how the county line thing is seen. I know we see it as the more the merrier, but will there be, a little bit to Ashley, right? Like, will there be pushback from other counties, do you think, of us welcoming businesses to kind of meet with us and talk with us?
Your question.
I hesitate because the ones that I, have the most experience with, I would say no. But I think that there are some others that are just on the edge of, but Essex County, I think, is going to be open to it.
So whereas Roost has its own economic development person and it's focused very much on the epicenter around Lake Placid and the facilities there, although it provides services across the region. EDC is an entity that's based in the park that does some, but not all of what we do. They lead a revolving loan fund and they support Main Street businesses in many small hamlets. Yeah. But in terms of strategic work, what are the objectives that drive the economy? What are the policy and advocacy things that we can be doing? How do we advocate formally as a business entity for things like housing or broadband infrastructure? How do we engage in communities' efforts to improve their own infrastructure? I don't know that structure doesn't exist in Essex County the way we do it.
No, and I think that everybody recognizes that we're all trying to solve the same problems for the majority of it, right? And so that work together is more effective together, right? So I don't think there would be pushback on it. I think it would be welcomed.
We had really strong relationships with people who are slowly stepping away. So Bill Farber in Hamilton County, we did a lot of work around broadband together, and I think he sees us as a trusted ally and partner. Jim McKenna, when he was leading Roost, was the same. In fact, he co-presented with us at many housing forums. And so because he saw the overlap of what we were trying to work on. I think we have good relationships, although they're evolving with the players that come in behind people like that. Gary Douglas from the North Country Chamber also. In fact, today, right now, we have a contingent of childcare experts that we're essentially wheeling out of this office that are meeting with Gary and his team in Plattsburgh right now.
And we connected with Adam DeSantis.
Bruce,
He's the Roost.
He's technically falls under Roost, but he's not the fund that comes from the town and the village. So it was just easier for them to employ him, but his whole role is on development.
So he sat next to me at Adirondack Day, and we lead the economic development sector for Adirondack Day for the entire region. And so he and I sit next to each other and talk to each other, but we have not yet collaborated on any specific thing.
I think it would be a good step because he also is cross-county line, right? So the work that he's doing isn't just the main focus is in that area because the main driver is there. But again, the idea is to solve problems that everyone is facing and to use the resources that they have available from architects and other things to help solve some of those problems. So I think he would be a good starting point for a conversation.
Yeah, I think we'll also talk to the leadership at Bruce, so they know that we're making that approach. And I think Dan will be fine with this. He and I talk a lot about other things.
But again, absolutely the door.
Whenever we find somebody like that, our approach is to figure out where it is that we can collaborate together and build that relationship. So Svetlana, I can't remember her last name, but she's somebody that's being funded by a combination of resources in the park, including the Adirondack Community Fund. And I think there's another organization, but she's leading an entrepreneurship initiative in the park. They would benefit from us cross-promoting and bringing mutual participants to events, particularly on the periphery of the park. So we met with her to do that. I think that's our whole goal, is find people we should be working with, start working with them, and then from there, look to figure out what else could we do and how would we do it. There is no approach directly to businesses to poach, because there's no poaching to be had. There's no organization that is paying to belong to an organization like us. The real question, though, is if, for instance, we're trying to advance issues like 340B, there is value in us aggregating the mass across the region to say this is in all our interest, and this is an economic issue as well as a healthcare and a social issue. And those are the opportunities I want us to see, us step into with value. But all of this is a work in progress, and it's something that we want to encourage your input and thought, whether it's now or anytime. And if we see issues that are developing, that would be particularly helpful, because our goal is to do no harm. We're not looking to compete, we are looking to collaborate.
Jim, I think one of the things that we need to be cautious about is the fickle nature of Warren County Board. It says EDC Warren County. They're
You're flanking.
with our budget issues and everything else. I won't be on the board next year. So we need to be a little strategic in terms of how we make this happen and not have Warren County feel as though we're paying for out of the area type of support. So we need to just be aware.
So when we do things that are overt in the park, like this childcare thing, we made sure there was a separate line of funding so there would be no discussion of why are we subsidizing this work across the entire park. But I think we need to also be clear here. We are going to be under financial stress with or without any outreach activity we do from Warren County, from Queensbury, and from the city. We've already experienced it with the city of Queensbury. We've experienced it once and repaired it once with the county. But in the last 5 years, without any of this, our funding by every municipality has been reduced. So I think we have to proactively deal with it. And I get that it's a fine line, but being afraid all it means is that all we can do is structure the best deal we can with our municipal partners and then pick up the pieces. I think they would, I believe, embrace the idea that we're attempting to diversify our funding so that they're not solely responsible, but in a way that doesn't feel like they've been left behind.
But it's funny, we suffer from a similar kind of outside feeling, EDC and Bruce. Because I work with some outlying municipalities in Essex, and I hear it at meetings that they believe the focus of Bruce is Lake Placid, right? And then the other outside towns are like, well, okay, you can get a nod. That feeling up there is very prevalent. We face that same kind of, I would say, with lack of foundation, criticism in Warren County, right? There's a belief that we here, EDC is focused on Glens Falls, Queensbury. and the other town did not, right? So when you were talking about talking to Screw and things like that, what was going through my mind is what Mike just said is, you gotta watch your flame. That, oh, now you're expanding into Essex. I completely get it. This is not you know, these issues know no boundaries, right? So, yeah, we need to advocate regionally because Warren County's been that different, right? Like, that's why I don't believe in the lines thing, you know, but that criticism, somebody, if they see us working with Screw or Essex, that, those words are gonna come out of somebody's mouth, right? Like,
Yeah, I
it's
know exactly who.
it's easy to go negative, right? So I think that's a very good comment, not to not do it, but to
I've been
understand
long enough to know that company is the area we gotta watch.
why this
And
benefits
I
Warren
think you do
County.
a good job, as long as we can show it, and that's gain to Warren County
Absolutely.
from all these activities.
Yep.
Like, with broadband, we didn't have to come up with the whole apparatus, but it helped our area get connected.
Well, the housing issue,
Yeah.
if people build housing in Screw, to your point, that's gonna benefit Chester and Oregon, right? But just is that those people are gonna work somewhere.
Well,
And they're
what's
gonna go to
interesting,
restaurants.
what's interesting about Screw is they approached us because of the work that we're doing in North Creek. And their view is, it was infrastructure first. You helped bring infrastructure funding and problem solving to bear. That then unleashed the ability to further develop community. I think they're looking for access to the process and support through that process. I don't think that is a bad thing. I think that most Adirondack communities would have this exact same challenge. And almost all of it accrues to us in our economic pillars. The tourism industry dollars probably stay in region, but the healthcare dollars funnel straight to here through Hudson Headwaters and through the hospital primarily, but through pretty much every specialist and every part of the healthcare ecosystem. The banking community tends to flow to here. The legal and professional services flows to here. So to the extent that somebody can lead a professional life or more people can move to a place like Screw, it's up to us to make the case, but that almost disproportionately accrues to us. In Tye, in Screw, in Indian River, in Long Lake, it's all coming this way.
Or at least the upper rim, is that, like, Screw disproportionately benefits like Pottersville, Adirondack, Northern Hamlets. Same thing with our Northbridge side, with Nerva, just outside the other side of the line.
Right.
You know, a lot of it accrues to North Creek, so, and Falls and Warrensburg, but there's that connection of all of it does come down, the funnel comes down to here.
Well, beyond that, I think it's not just Essex County, it's Washington, I know we've discussed Washington County, Saratoga County, founders, we were members of the EDC, we're in Saratoga County. I think that's a very obvious connection, but just framing the conversation when we go to Warren County or in any of our materials, that this will save us resources, right? The more we can collaborate, the more we can work on the same issues and frame it in that way, I think is probably better for us, for the public, I can see exactly what you're saying. Maybe Essex County is an easier sell because that is very, everything does funnel here, but not everything we support in Northern Saratoga County is directly from that
Just careful message.
to here. Yeah, so just really careful messaging, or even just careful thought that we go into these.
And to put a further guardrail around this, we for now 3 years have convened a regional economic alliance. And we had our last meeting this past week, and it was so big that we couldn't fit in the conference room over here. Everybody from Saratoga County, Washington County, and anybody who's associated with economic development in the area that wants to participate does. And sometimes we have 10 or 12 people there. And we work on the things that clearly are in our regional interest. Nobody's being told to go to that. I think there's value in us aggregating mass around certain strategic things and collaborating across those lines when it provides value. I've yet to see the resistance for it, but I fully am sensitive, having lived through at least one wave of this at the county, that it is always just below the surface.
Do you ever contact that community development in Essex County?
Well, yeah,
Anna
yeah, so
Reynolds?
yeah, we wind up going backwards through them through initiatives like housing, maybe not less, broadband not so much, but yes.
Because their county, the interest that I would point to them, they're very well set up from again, my municipality standpoint, Essex County Community Development is really a hub for running infrastructure projects and things like that, right? And Anna and her team, they do the grant administration, things like that, whereas more in Washington County, it's really left up to the municipalities, right? Very fraction. But that's a tremendous resource up there, and I always tell the supervisors that, listen, you need to keep funding that department, because they are a massive resource to municipalities that want to undertake these things.
But then that's a
Sewer,
place,
housing.
so that's a place of collaboration, because we could take the case of North Creek together with that capacity and say, how do we do this?
Well, I'm working in E-Town right now, they're trying to get sewers, right? And Hannah, Hannah, the whole team there are the experts at this stuff. It's really, from a government standpoint, they're getting the bang for the buck. I think that's the side.
Glens Falls and Queensbury are each their own individual component in this, but the outer county is indistinct when you cross a county line. North Creek from Indian Lake,
It's a sign of a,
yeah, and as a result, their problems are much more universal, and it's really about approaching this from a park governance and park policy standpoint. Almost all the funding is based on density, and that means that the park is always at the back end of that process. Where we'll be much more successful advocating to change that together than individually as Warren County. But it would benefit all of our communities as well as theirs. So we're in process here. This is a dialogue that we're trying to make sure that we start both in the meetings and all the time. And if you see either indications of trouble or opportunity, we'd like to know about it right away. Thank you.
And back to you.
Well, we have some data to share with you. Maybe John will go into this.
Yep, this past month we picked up 3 new engagements. Didn't drop out any, continue our talking to social and other groups here. All 3 of these are business, actually two of the engagements we got this month are business expansion opportunities for people, business assistants. One is a consultant looking to connect up with people in the market more directly, based out of here in Glens Falls. Another one is an existing business that's been here for a number of years, looking for some potential to transition, not publicly, but wanted to talk to us formally about it.
They're looking to figure out how to keep that business here when the ownership is no longer here, when they need to step away from it.
And then the other one is a new development opportunity in North Country from a business operator here in Glens Falls and in North Creek. There are 2 situations, but wants to develop a recreational facility as an idea. So we're debating that with the early stages of that, and seeing what the possibilities might be and what opportunities there are to have some assistance.
I think one of the more important things here is to see that line that continues to steadily grow. The main part of that is that the things that are 12 months old are not dying. We continue to maintain those. If we had 3 in and 3 out, that number would be flat. Instead, it just continues to go up by a couple.
Next page, pretty much the same breakout in the spread of projects through different types of subgroups. We talked about this before, the real estate, the services side of the properties are not unfortunate, but there's still lots of other active ones, and it's because there's not a lot of them doesn't mean they're not impactful.
We're going to talk a little bit about manufacturing later on, but it just continues to hover between 10 and 12%. And despite oftentimes the narrative is that this thing is in steep decline. It is not in steep decline. It is in maintenance mode and has been for several years. I think that is a good outcome, by the way. I think in the rest of the economy, this is in, if not steep decline, in regular, kind of steady decline. Mostly due to automation. So not necessarily because the economics, the dollar value are coming out, but in terms of the head count. We've been able to relatively stay stable here, which sometimes staying where you are is a win. We engage with manufacturers proactively all the time about things that we can do. Oftentimes, their business plans are not situated for job growth. But we try to optimize as much as we can to make sure that the resources we have, the incentives that we have are always available and always advocated proactively.
One of the things we talked about quite a bit is the number of startups we work with in small business. That's kind of dovetailed and explained better in the next couple of charts. We get this update from CEG, which basically posted out the census data that's released. This is the tracking that we do with the small business formation portion of our economy in the MSA, basically, but also in the county. The difference between business and corporations and the active micro businesses.
So a micro business is somebody who's registered in a website that can be identified here and that we can see as they're bona fide and they're business based. There's still some, and by the way, there is an adjustment there for those that are clearly property handling LLCs. So that number comes out of the work that CEG does. The reason we have CEG do this is because it's important for us to have a third party do this so it doesn't sound like we're telling our own story. We could do this, but I like the process that they have because it's consistent with how they do this for other communities. And the methodology is one that's been accepted, by others. I think the part to focus on is the Department of State. Those are corporations or LLCs that are registered with the state. That doesn't always mean that we know who they are or what they're doing. What we do know is that they are not a property owning LLC that has advertised a short-term rental. That's what we know about those. Obviously, we try to run these down as much as we can. We try to correlate this to the business activity we have, lots of other sources, but this is an area that we have a lot more work to do to really understand where is this, why is it happening, what could we do to help it be more, but it's still steady.
So does that back out all land holding companies?
But it is
Not just
retail.
Airbnb?
No, so an LLC does not have to tell you what they're doing to register. So if they're completely opaque, there could be a landholding inactive LLC in that number. But if an LLC is formed and then we can correlate that to a short-term rental or a property that's being run for income, we have a process with CEG to net that out. I don't think it's perfect, but it does adjust for what I think is probably the majority of those entities that are solely formed to manage a property.
Every time we do it, we better on that.
Yeah.
Which is why you see that that number does not match the number of total LLCs that are formed. This is the adjusted number after that correction.
Well, the other charts that are on here also show a couple of things. One, basically the average has been higher, fairly high for an area size per capita. So that here, it does show that it's been fairly consistent over the past 5 years. And this chart, the second last, the one with the red bars, really kind of shows the jump really from the pandemic. And it's stayed very consistent. It's actually growing. So it's like, it's markedly different.
This is why we know we have more work to do to understand the sector and support it. If this was a pure COVID-driven, then reset phenomenon, perhaps we wouldn't commit significant time and energy to understanding it, but in this particular case, it appears to be here to stay. And now we have to better understand and better support it, which we're working on.
The next chart here, residential investment, this is another tip we got from CEG, our researcher down there. He sent us a note that said, by the way, you had probably best year in building permit in the county since 2007. It may not seem like a lot, but it's jumping for us percentage-wise. It's very significant. So we're moving in the right direction. We have a ways to go with that.
Well,
It's registering.
I'm not so much trying to counter narratives as it is to educate us all about what is really happening versus what people think is happening. A building permit could be for a big multi-use thing, or it could be for a single family home. But you can see with your eyes that there are hundreds of building units under construction in Glens Falls. If you go to Queensbury, you will see that there are significant opportunities in the pipeline. What this suggests is that pretty much robustly, including the single-family home area, we are seeing more activity than we have traditionally. And I think that's a good sign. Adding capacity here is the single greatest thing we can do that essentially underpin our economy. As an aging place, we need the ability to receive more people. And this suggests that we are making progress. If you were to look backwards at the goals that were laid out in the study that we helped fund with the county, it would suggest that we're still in a deficit, but we are cutting into that deficit every day. Now, if you talk to developers, which we do, they will still tell you that it is vexing to do this work here.
I am working with Queensbury, Glens Falls, and Monroe right now to clear the backlog through EDC. I think 700-800 units sewer, combined sewer overflows. Which is a quirk in the DEC regs that all the municipalities are jammed up right now. Washington County too, but it's been a huge issue for Queensbury, and now Monroe's going to be development too. But the city probably needs to clear that out. Hopefully we'll get it.
We pointed that many times to you as the person that could help.
We'll get it done. Just time money, right? That's everything.
This is important information I feel like that could be shared with the public, just to change the perception around housing. So whether it's listed on our website, people can start directing people there, or what, but I feel like it's great information, but it's hard to have like in a one-on-one conversation with somebody and them to believe you that this is actually the reality. So the more that we put this kind of that.
And there are significant underlying policy issues too, even with municipalities that don't want to accept water infrastructure, and they don't want to accept sewer, or they don't want to accept roads, right? For a developer, those are monster obstacles now, because if the municipality won't accept those things, then you have to form a homeowner association, which is a monster cost, and that's got to be approved by the Attorney General's office, and you need special transportation corporation. So these, we talk about housing and things like that, and on one of them, we were working with the governor's office to try to kind of pave that way, so to speak. But those are like little policy issues that we don't see every day in the news.
Well,
It's very difficult.
I want to take both of you up on this. I think we can share more information not only with you, but with the public. Maybe we'll curate it with you and then get out in front of the public. There are major housing initiatives that are on the cusp of public engagement or in public engagement. West Mountain is an example. Nearly $200 million, been in the works for many years. But there's a pending one that's working its way through the Queensbury planning process right now at the Bay Meadows property for senior living. That would be significant in terms of the number of units. And we've begun the process with the city and with its organizations like its LVC over Tech Meadows in a discussion about mixed use development.
Both of those will be jammed up because of that.
Right.
Combined sewer overflow.
And I think in order for us to essentially kind of get everyone ready for an enlightened conversation, public conversation about these things. By the way, there's also true in Lake George. Joe Gross is trying to build 450 units in Lake George that has similar infrastructure issues associated with Lake George. Joe himself is also a developer in Queensbury and has 50 lots, some big and some small for subdivisions and some for individual homes, and we work regularly with him. You put all this together, it's a big, big pile of stuff that's in the front view. And I think getting everyone to understand this is not just about West Mountain, this is not just about the Lake George project. This is about the fact that this is a critical need for the community, that there are common issues and obstacles, and that we're here to help, solve them and get the right outcome. If all those things were to come to fruition, we would be making the largest, growth over a 5 or 10 year period.
1,000 units.
Yeah, in our lifetime in this area. So I think this is very, very significant, and we do need to tell the story better. Maybe what we'll do is take an action, Eric, to go through this inventory and to talk about the talking points that we feel comfortable with and the role of the EDC in this, and then have some kind of public event with the business community in particular, but, larger initiatives.
And the last chart we have here is just a snapshot of our social engagements or activity over the past month compared and we continue to get good traction on our efforts. Folks, the followers keep growing, and that's good. And all the platforms we got. LinkedIn and Facebook seem to be the most active. Instagram's not really the same audience, whatever.
This is one of the things we want to talk to the advisory board about. I think that we are talking to the same people, not all the people, and figuring out how we do that. As Eric gets more and more comfortable in his role, we will continue to grow the communication side of what he's doing. I think the second half of the year will be much more deliberative around a campaign that's on message and scheduled as opposed to fairly ad hoc at the moment. We try to focus on things that are aligned with our goals, but not necessarily things that we plan 2 weeks out. I'd like to get that to be a much more regimented process than we have an asset now that can really help. There are a number of things that we need to share with you that aren't here, but I'll go through this very quickly. We are in dialogue now with somebody about a piece around 340B. It took a while before we were able to close the loop there, but you will see a piece under our banner advocating for the regional benefit of 340B protection and framing it as an economic issue. The way that it was originally proposed to me, I think we can make it even tighter aligned to the economic strategies that we have in the area, but that will appear, I believe, in the next 2 weeks. We have accepted, at least provisionally, an offer for the Queensberry lots, the 2 lots that, lot 1 and 2 at Queensberry Industrial Park that we own. The way this process works, I educated myself on it because we've never had this problem before, is that it has to be noticed with the state. It's in the notice period. As we come to the completion of that notice period and advance towards actually closing on it, we will bring formal resolution to this board. But they were reappraised this spring and they were purchased at full market value. This is really important. Again, part of the narrative we need to bring to the public. We helped facilitate the sale of crew to the city in Tech Meadows. That was last year. You can see the construction is underway. We've now got a successful offer, in the process for Queensberry Industrial Park. Both of those places sat for more than 20 years with neither of those things. Yeah, and we met with the cannabis operator who's already had his planning board approval for the back end of the park. That was a county-owned lot in Queensberry Industrial Park to try to help him advance through, but he's finally gotten his licenses from the state so he can advance. What this means is there's development in these parks that have not occurred for literally decades. In no way are we solely responsible for that, but it's an indication that the market continues to be here for us and that we play a critical role in catalyzing it. I'm going to work to try to figure out the best way to capture this story and present it to the public, but I think it is something that it's not so much a victory lap, it's getting people to understand what we're doing is finally taking root.
Well, when the county and the town say, why have you done for us lately? Right, Mike? Yes. It's smiling right now.
I mentioned this before, and I would like to engage formally the committee and full board structure to take the proceeds from the sale of those lots and be very intentional about what we do with it. And my proposal is that we create a board, is it designated? That's designated fund for working capital for the grant work that we could potentially do if we were able to advance our own working capital. I think this is a big step towards us diversifying our funding. If we're able to do grant work that's aligned with our objectives and we have the working capital to do it so we don't have to ask municipalities to do it, we would be able to, I think, do more of that grant work. We have several that are sitting here waiting for this working capital issue to be resolved. So, it would be modest, in this case, a couple $100,000, $300,000 but there are, for instance, we would have been able to put this connectivity thing to bed on our own without having to go to the municipalities and then simply structure an agreement with the municipalities about how they would receive this if we had had this. So we'll begin that process with the Audit and Finance Committee in the next cycle. We are working with the Lake George Chamber to come meet with you, Anastasia, on some of the things that have happened around hospitality program and in general, more of the dialogue between the business community and the college. We're a convener and a facilitator of that process and continue to try to play that role. I think we're working on getting meeting dates, is that right, Eric?
We've got dates.
You've got dates for some.
Yeah, just getting the right people.
Yeah, and then right now there is a contingent of national child care experts rolling through the park. They're meeting with you on Friday. Oregon, California, Washington DC, New York City. These are people that the Rockefeller Family Fund and the Adirondack Community Fund have brought to bear on this idea of developing innovative child care solutions for the Adirondack Park. We are the grant administrator for a big piece of that. We have the person who's actually managing all these community engagements across the park, working at our direction out of this office. You met her, Mary Feldman. Within 30 days of her being here, we've now, I think today they're in Plattsburgh, yesterday they were in Malone in Saranac Lake. We will be in North Creek later this week. It's quite an effort. I've been trying to keep this not necessarily right in the public's eye until we start to develop some momentum and some solutions that we can at least propose and talk about, because expectations can be very high here. And our goal is to essentially get in front of the train of the child care investment that's occurring in the state by saying that the traditional models will never work in the Adirondack Park. They never do on any of this stuff. If it's population-based, then we will never be able to accomplish anything of import here. But if we work backwards from what would it take in order for us to develop 2 or 3 innovative child care models that we could propose and try for several years in the park, and then use those backwards to say, this is what the funding needs to go to in places that don't meet the population model, and get that as part of the disbursement process. It's an ambitious goal, but we have some of the smartest people around child care policy in the whole country right here with us now to talk about it, and it didn't cost us anything to do it. So this is the same opportunistic approach that we took to broadband. I believe that housing is probably more important. I believe infrastructure is probably more important if we were to look at it in terms of true priorities for these communities. But if the money is flowing in broadband, or if it's flowing in child care, and we can bring the same argument, which is that the model needs to be adapted for the park, particularly because the park was formed by the state to not allow it to work the way the rest of the place does. If we can frame that conversation and be an important convener at getting that altered, it will affect not only all the communities that we're all aware of, but it will hopefully be a precedent we can apply to things like housing and infrastructure. So this work is bigger than childcare. We've asked you to participate, and we've asked several of you as businesses to participate. This is not an attempt to survey you, to ask you what your childcare needs are. This is an attempt to get in front of business. We need to get this thought of as a strategic issue that is in our economies and our long-term interest of figuring out how to reverse the things that don't work and find a sustainable way for them to work in our area. So we're going to keep coming, looking for your help on this. I think it may be one of our best opportunities in the next year of raising the profile of the kind of impact work we can do. Okay, that's everything.
This,
Okay, yeah, and Eric, go ahead.
Sure.
I'll keep it quick.
Jim, can I back up just a second? I'm happy to share this. We did an internal survey of our employees about their daycare needs and gathered a lot of really interesting information. So,
We'll take it.
okay.
It's not that we don't want that, it's that we are going well beyond that. We try to also engage you as thought leaders and people who understand the region. Go ahead.
Cool, I think 2 updates. First, we have established a bi-weekly staff meeting. It's a structured meeting. Just wanted to give you an update on what the structure is. We're taking a small to large approach, starting small and moving to large issues and topics. We'll start with things like housekeeping, things that just need to be covered that popped up over the last week or 2. Move on to a staff report out on last week's successes, what we're doing this week and next week as far as leads from each other. we're structuring it so that it falls after and before the board meetings, so that we can work on agendas as well as have a debrief of the meetings with EDC as well as LDC. Discussion of larger events, ongoing and larger projects, like the ones we've been discussing, additional business. The next item on the agenda is the last page in your materials. This is intended to be your one-sheet talking points for engaging with the business community about membership and growing EDC in one of those ways that Jim discussed. It's meant to be in bite-sized pieces, although it is roughly in paragraph form. You'll see that most of those are talking points under what is EDC, just a bite-sized piece of how to describe it. And then under each of these headings on the first page is about a 1 to 2 sentence piece followed by an example of how we do that in the community. We've got some growth charts in here and talking points about our business engagement, for instance, and how we continue to grow, and the economic study that put Warren County in the top 10% of all the economic indicators. With a little asterisk because it's not just Warren County, it was Glens Falls MSA, so it does include Washington County as well. On the back, just talking points about the 3 pillars of EDC, and then recent impact highlights, more specific examples of the work that we do. This is more than a draft, but it is also a work in progress. So as you have discussions with 1 or 2 folks over the next month, and as we meet next time, I'm happy to make adjustments to it. Certainly, this format may not work for everyone. I also have prompting questions and engaging topics and a formal ask example if anyone wants more of a script. But we wanted to just provide you with, we're calling it a 1-pager, but it's back and forth. So I'm counting that as 1 page as 1 page.
This will continue to evolve, so if it's imperfect, tell us and we'll continue that next.
Any other business? Need for executive session? I will take a motion to adjourn the meeting.
Motion to adjourn?
Kathy, seconded by Jim, all in favor?
Aye.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yeah.